Hey, it's Jeff Hyman, your startup therapist, and I'm here with Dayton Ogden. Hey, Dayton.
Hey, Jeff, how are you?
Good. Thank you for joining us today. Dayton, you've been
Sure.
in the executive search and recruiting world for, 15 years now, maybe
Yeah,
more.
about 15 years. Yeah.
I don't want to date you,
You can date me.
Dayton, you're now in a very interesting role, and that's why I wanted to share your story today with our viewers. So Dayton is, just by means of introduction, is the head of talent and recruiting at Summit Partners. Now, if you're not familiar, Summit is one of the most successful and largest venture capital and private equity firms in the world. The business is worldwide, North America, Europe, and Asia. You've got, what, $15-20 billion under management, something like that?
15 billion under. We're raising our ninth fund. Yeah.
Great. So hundreds and hundreds of investments, portfolio companies. Safe to say that Summit, has helped contribute to inventing the VC and private equity world. Your role there, as I understand it, is as head of talent recruiting, is to help fill the vacancies and find talent and build organizations across as many of these companies as you can. I know you reside in the Northeast. You do this for West Coast companies, European companies, et cetera, Asian companies.
Right.
So I thought you'd be just a perfect person to talk to.
Great. Thank you. Well, I'm happy to be here.
So let's start with just 60 seconds on your story, kind of how you think about that role, that charter.
Sure.
What are the big challenges with it, and what an entrepreneur should start to think about in terms of issues?
Sure. So I got introduced to Summit in sort of a funny way. I actually was calling on some of the partners to try and recruit them out because I had a track record in doing principal investing searches for venture capital and private equity firms. So I got attention that way and then started working very closely with them across their portfolio. Did a good job for them. And once you do a good job for a private equity firm, phone calls start coming from all directions. And it got to the point where I started doing so much work that they said, why don't you just come over here and run talent for us? And I said, okay, well, let's try and talk about how we define that.
Yep.
And what we ultimately concluded, although we're still refining, and this is an ongoing project in terms of circumscribing the role, is that I'm really here to try and increase the velocity, but also the quality of every senior level talent initiative going on across the portfolio, or as many as I can.
Got it.
That's sort of the first. That's more philosophical than a milestone or something that's tangible. How I do that is two ways. One is I actually will execute searches with my team, which is a little different than some of the other talent apparatus at some of the other firms. I wanted to keep my hand in search because I love it. I'm a recruiter.
Yep.
So anyway, we will actually execute work in instances where we know the candidate pool incredibly well. We know the subject matter well, and we have the bandwidth. So when it's appropriate, we'll actually execute. In most cases, we will help facilitate a process, and we will work with a third-party search firm with whom we've gotten close. So our job is to build relationships with, so they're not just one-off, but they're real, bi-directional relationships with search firms, so that we have go-to resources to help execute across the portfolio. And the purview, Jeff, just because we have close to 90 companies in Europe, North America, is CEO, one direct report away, and board. That's
so basically the leadership team of the company.
The leadership teams of the companies, that's right.
You mentioned the word talent, so maybe that's a great place to start. How do you define talent? How do you know a rock star when you see them? It's a very elusive, subjective kind of thing, or maybe it's not. So for our viewers, many of whom run companies or are starting companies, what are the key attributes that you look for that are consistent, regardless of the specific sector, whether it's wireless or hardware, it doesn't matter, but talent with a capital T?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, so, and it has changed, and this is a controversial subject, Jeff, because some people say, look, if you just put your thumb in the air and you listen to your gut, you'll be right most of the time, and you will have a higher batting average than those that try and apply some clinical approach to understanding humanity.
Yep.
And there may be some truth to that. That's why it's a controversial subject. We're talking about human beings. Human beings are complicated and they're difficult to figure out. And what you see is not always what you get.
Yep.
So what do you do about that? And we're trying to be at the vanguard of that subject in terms of human assessment, understanding someone's social intelligence, their emotional maturity, and also their critical thinking ability,
Sure.
Which is another way of saying how smart somebody is, but in a problem-solving context.
Yep.
Is someone self-aware? Do they have the ability to benefit from the good ideas of other people? One of the you talked about founders earlier and CEOs before we got on video here. One of the hallmarks of a great leader is someone who has a demonstrated track record in benefiting from the good ideas of other people, even though they may have a big ego, they may have enormous skills, they may be abundantly talented themselves, and very often they usually are. But if they have that self-awareness and know where they need to be augmented, and also are able to take inputs from other people and then execute against those people are, they're hard to find, but those people are fantastic. Another element that we have to be cognizant of here, particularly in the venture portfolio, is we are in the age of the millennial, and this next generation of talent that's coming up, Jeff, is clearly focused on being part of a mission. Mm-hmm. They want to be part of, everyone to some extent, most people to some extent are coin operated and they want to make money and everything. And that's an immutable fact of life, I think. But what we're seeing increasingly with the talent that's coming up into their peak performance years they want to be part of a story. They want to be part of something special. They want to be a mission. Absolutely want to be part of a mission. And some people roll their eyes at this and are incredulous and say that sounds like kumbaya and everyone just wants to make money. We are seeing it in abundant evidence.
When you say, just so I'm clear, Dayton, when you say millennial, you're thinking what, age 30 and below?
Yes, that's I use that as a broad swath, but yes.
So the founder or founders, their challenge is to harness the good ideas of their team, not necessarily take the Steve Jobs approach of we're taking that hill, but to harness from the team and to craft that into a mission that drives retention and keeps people when the headhunters call and when someone can afford to pay more.
That's a very good way of saying it, and sort of re-saying what I just said, which was that if someone's part of a plan that is bigger than themselves, and they feel like they have having a material impact on that plan and that their ideas are accepted, then we have seen success. When in moments where we have sort of an autocrat who is by decree saying, let's take that hill, unless someone is just, preternaturally gifted, and, you've got a Steve Jobs situation, there's always outliers.
Right, and I always tell people, if you're Steve Jobs, you can do that, but you're not Steve Jobs, right?
You're not Steve Jobs. Exactly. So by and large, we have seen that method employed to great success in the portfolio, and it's something that's kind of new, to be honest.
Right. Do you see any trends in terms of demographics of these people that have this ability, this team harnessing ability, mission forming ability? Do they tend to be one gender? Do they tend to be a certain age? Do they tend to have a certain background and experience? Startups or big companies, nonprofit, were they family people or athletes? Is there any indicators?
No, but I will. No, not really. Because they come from all areas in the market and all walks of life. I will say that when you see someone with an early pattern of achievement, very often with a military experience in their background, and this is actually a proxy sometimes for military experience, if they were at an organization, an academy company where they were inculcated in some method, like at PTC in the sales organization under McMahon or something and they were indoctrinated into a certain method, and they come out with this sort of the rudiments of a skill set that those people very often who have either experienced an academy or true academy company experience, or they've been through some appreciable military experience. Those people seem to be able to employ this.
The challenge is whether they can make the successful adjustment to a startup, which is a very different environment.
Totally different.
It's diametrically opposed to a large academy company, a Procter & Gamble, et cetera.
Very much so. And working in a resource-constrained environment versus working in a academy company are two different things. But to answer your question, the answer is no. They come from all walks of life and all different sort of ages and genders.
Aside from academy companies' military experience, what other things have you learned that you can teach an entrepreneur or founder to look for during the interview process, that are predictive of success? Let's say it's a founder looking for their top team, so their CMO or their head of technology or COO. What am I asking that is actually predictive of success versus bullshit questions, which are just a waste of time in interviews?
Well, I like to ask people, what's the most difficult thing they've ever done? Because you get a very interesting response to that. And it kind of pries open a door into how they think about other people and where they fit into a scheme and into a team. And here's what I mean by that. I find the people that aren't just sort of uniformly positive about everything that's happened in their life or in their vocation are the ones that are the most compelling. The people, and they're the ones who tend not to point fingers when something goes wrong.
Right.
People who give a balanced portrayal of their life. I mean, life is messy. It's hard.
Yeah.
You screw up. You make terrible decisions at times.
Sure.
So those who give a balanced portrayal of what's happened in their life and in their career and demonstrate an ability to learn. This is a key point. The pace of change in the economy today has never been greater. The set of challenges that you're facing today, you can bet that they're going to be totally different in 6 months. So
right.
that someone who's demonstrated an ability to be agile and flexible
and deals with the situation as it is, not as they want it to be.
That's right. And so that's why exactly deals with the situation as it is, not as they want it to be. But that's why I like that question of what's the most difficult thing you've ever done, because it demonstrates some agility, some extensibility.
Right. So what would be an example of a crappy answer that you would say, that's the toughest thing you've ever faced? Or how would they answer it in a way that you would say that's not what we're looking for in a startup leader?
I think you get the sort of rote kind of humble brag where I guess the hardest thing was, graduating top 5% of my class at Harvard Business School and, stuff that doesn't, which is fine. And I'm not deprecating that answer or I'm just saying that it doesn't shed a lot of light into who somebody is and how they think of what their real drivers are. So something where someone exposes some vulnerability, a little vulnerability.
So I adopted a child, or I was in a horrible car accident and had to recover for 6 months, and here's what that entailed, and here's the team I rallied to help give me what I needed. That can be non-work experience can be as predictive.
Absolutely, someone who demonstrates some humanity, because being a part of a startup, you're around human beings and you're around a family, and a startup is very much like a family. So demonstrating that you can exist inside that framework, inside of a family, and a key part of existing inside of a family is exposing your vulnerabilities sometimes and showing where you have shortcomings.
Do you find, and this is a controversial question, so I'll ask it, do you find women are better equipped or more comfortable going there, entering the danger and having these vulnerable conversations just because of the nature of who they are?
I wish I saw more gender diverse talent, more women talent. I don't have enough of a sample size, and this is I say this, I'm lamenting this. I wish I saw more female flow. I don't see enough.
The flow is still constrained.
It's still a trickle. It's terrible in our business. It's shameful.
Right.
We are adamant about trying to affect change and be progressive about this, and it's just not enough. I'm not seeing enough. There's not enough sample size for you to say, hey, Jeff, which is terrible, which is a problem, which is a bigger problem.
So let's say we've made the hire, and now we're getting a bad feeling. We got a gut feeling that something's wrong here. As you said, you're not going to be perfect in hiring. As a founder, CEO, entrepreneur, how long do I give the situation before I say I made a mistake and I need to do something about it?
So a little axiom we use around here is, if it's a difficult decision, it's an easy one. No one ever waited too long to get rid of somebody, and I don't say that glibly or it's not I don't mean to sound Machiavellian about it, but if it becomes, when your gut is telling you that, it's usually substantiated by real fact.
Right.
So making sure that it's not just gut is important, and understanding why your gut is telling you that is important. But make the decision fast. Rip I can't emphasize this enough.
Yeah.
Rip the Band-Aid off. It's very often easier to go with the devil you know, even if that that devil is a B- or a C+.
Right.
It's because you're worried about the switching costs
Yep.
associated with pulling a new person
the cultural impact and all that stuff.
Everything. And so people default to just staying with what they've got. And I can't emphasize enough, you need to just pull the tape off on that.
As hard a situation as that is, I think the next one's even harder, which I'm curious how you advise your portfolio companies to handle this. And that is, as the business scales and grows, someone that was an A player on my team, just a rock star when we were 10 people, isn't scaling with the organization, and now we are 100 people, and they're just not able to keep up. You can call it Peter Principle, call it whatever you want. So you've had someone that's loyal, faithful, kicked ass, done a great job, but now the business is starting to outgrow them. How do I handle that situation, which is obviously a lot more delicate?
That is extremely difficult. I mean, there's no panacea for that. That we run into that all the time.
You should. If the business is doing well and growing, you should run into it, right?
The only thing I will say is that the notion that there are only, you're only a 0 to 10 million person, or only a 10 to $50 million person, or only a 50 to $150 million person is a little bit flawed. You should not take a orthodox interpretation of that rule that people throw around a lot.
Right.
Because, and this gets back to agility, potential, the ability to change, the ability to adapt. So this is why it's very important to understand someone's potential and aptitude, and not just look backward at their, behaviorally at their background, but look cognitively at their ability to adapt. That's why assessment is very important, because you may be wrong that someone who got you to 10 and is incredibly loyal can't go to 50.
Let's say now it's clear they're not scaling for whatever reason. Do I exit them? Do I give them some advance notice and not rip the Band-Aid off too quickly? Do I try to find another home in the organization for them? What do I do that preserves the culture, honors the individual?
Yeah. Honors the individual, and I'm big on loyalty. And I don't think you can just dismiss or scrap heap loyalty so readily. So I think trying to identify adjacencies where that person can be, because I'll tell you what is in very rare short supply. Short supply are people who are enormously loyal, who have given you everything, who will run through walls, who care about the organization. If someone has those ingredients, I would be much more reluctant to let them go, and work hard to find adjacent categories where they can.
So do everything you can to accommodate.
I would think so. I just don't run into that quality enough. Yep. So I would not be so ready to dismiss it.
Right. I understand. Last topic I want to shift to is a bit different, which is recruiting upward. So we've talked a lot about CEOs and founders and their relationship with the VC firm investor. We've talked about recruiting the management team. Let's talk about recruiting board members or advisors or other individuals who can help mentor or grow the company. Many times you take an investment, you've got a board, it is what it is, but you might want to recruit an independent board member or just someone to add value.
Right.
How does a founder CEO go about that process? Because it must be kind of funky, because they're kind of recruiting their future boss. So how do you advise founders to do that? What should they look for in those individuals?
Well, first of all, they need to be brutally honest with themselves, and they need to bring in an intermediary. And in cases where they're capable of doing it, and they should bring in an intermediary to do that, because it's like performing brain surgery on yourself. What you're looking for is very often someone who's going to come in as a foil.
Yeah, and push
you and disagree with you.
Yeah.
And create tension so that the right answer is exposed. The right answer is not exposed if you're just breathing in your own exhaust all the time. Yeah. This is a trap that many founders and CEOs fall into, which is that it's cronyism.
So when you say, just so I'm clear, when you say a third party, it could be an outside executive.
Well, it could be the investor, it could be me at Summit, or a search firm.
Sure.
But having an intermediary with an objective view of what's needed, where the soft spots, the blind spots are in your board or your advisor group is critical. It's very difficult. I don't care how self-aware you are to do that yourself. It's like self-brain surgery.
Am I trying to find someone that is as opposite of me as possible and argues with everything I say, or is that Where is the line between unhealthy conflict where it's just a grind and a pain in the ass versus that healthy tension?
No. Look, I think you're looking for someone in any case. I think there are some generic qualities that are uniform here, which are someone who's capable of challenging assumptions, someone who can come on board, understand the existing assumptions, and challenge them. That doesn't mean they have to be combative. It doesn't mean they have to. But if you want to find someone who's balanced, an assessment of a board member is just as important as the assessment of a management team. They're critical.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, finding someone who's going to come on and isn't just contrarian for the sake of it, but it's going to challenge the existing assumptions. Otherwise, what use are they?
Do I want to avoid first-time board members just because being a board member has a learning curve all by itself?
No.
As a startup, I don't have a lot of time.
You can't avoid it because there's not enough talent. There's not a big enough talent pool to avoid first-time board members.
Got it. How about industry experience? Do I specifically want someone from outside the industry to give a fresh perspective?
This depends. This really depends. It's subject matter depth. There are categories that are very esoteric that we back. There are some where the qualities are more generic across and fungible. In categories where it's more fun, it just totally depends. That is a case-by-case basis.
Got it. It's funny when I hear you talking about these things. It's so clear why this is so hard, right? The answer so often is it's case by case. It's situational. It depends. And on top of that, there's a vast shortage of talent because of just low unemployment rates, and then like you said, rock stars are just so hard to find. They're top 5%ers anyway. There's also
a demographic problem. I mean,
Sure.
There's real tangible evidence that suggests that people in their peak performing years, that population of humanity is going to drop 30% over the next 5 to 10 years.
Sure.
That's just real.
So when you add all that together, it tells me this is perhaps the hardest role or hardest piece of the role of a founder entrepreneur. Not lead gen or customer acquisition or any of that crap. Branding, coming up with a logo. It's building the organization and strengthening it and attracting talent.
Well,
you're obviously you're biased because you live in that world. So then the final question becomes, how much of my time should I spend on this stuff as a founder, entrepreneur? How much, and I know it's hard to give an answer, but how much of my time should be on culture and retention and performance and recruiting versus the task, the business stuff?
Right. I just think they're inextricably tied. I don't think the business stuff and the recruiting are different. I just think that if you have a vision and a mission, you've got to tie it to individuals. So I don't decouple those two concepts.
They're integrated.
They're totally integrated. You are who your people are, and you're now. I'm not dismissing the importance of product market fit, for God's sake. I mean, that is an enormously important concept. But if you have the right people, you can get to the right answer. If you populate your team with enough diversity and enough diversity of thought, you get to the right answer more often. It raises your batting average.
There's a great book I'll recommend. I don't know if you've read it. 5 Temptations of the CEO by Pat Lencioni. It was an inspirational book for me, and he was a consigliere of mine early in my career. And he talks a lot about CEOs that drive conflict and seek it out at every opportunity because that's where, as you say, the right answers become clear. Right. It's a very rare trait of founders, entrepreneurs.
It's all too rare. I couldn't agree more. But when you find it, it's great.
Well, it's been great to hear from you. How can people get in touch, learn more about Summit, get in touch with you, et cetera?
Yeah, have people feel free to reach out to me. It's my email address is dogden@summitpartners.com. They can call me. I've still got my West Coast cell number. For some reason, I can't let it go.
And if they want to just learn more about Summit?
SummitPartners.com. And I'm happy to talk to anybody who wants to learn more about our firm. We're going through some very interesting evolutions, and it's an exciting time here.
Great. Well, thank you again for spending the time with us. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeff.